The scene opens on a battlefield with two men standing face to face. One is calm and confident. The other, the protagonist Alan, stays silent, his tension obvious. The referee signals the start. The villain moves first, charging forward with full confidence, fully convinced this fight will end in his favor. Behind him, Lilith cheers him on, certain she's about to witness Alan's public humiliation. However, the moment barely lasts. In the blink of an eye, the charging noble is already on the ground. Defeated, the crowd doesn't even have time to react. And just like that, everything changes. But what exactly led to this humiliating fall? That fallen noble is Weiss Vincent, infamous as the villainous noble. From this defeat onward, his life spirals downward. He loses his status, his power, and his future. Later, he is reduced to serving the Demon King, only to be used as a shield and discarded. The story ends there. At the same time, in the real world, the player who was controlling the game suddenly dies. And that is where things truly begin to twist. Somewhere else, inside a quiet mansion, a maid is kneeling on the floor, crying. A man stands behind her, ready to punish her. Then, without warning, something shifts. His expression changes. Confusion replaces cruelty. The situation feels wrong, unfamiliar. He no longer understands where he is or why he is here. The man struggles to grasp what's happening. Moments ago, he was simply playing a game. Now, a maid is tied up right in front of him. The maid looks up, worried, calling him by a name that doesn't feel like his own. Waisama. As he looks closer, he notices her beauty and, more importantly, a strange sense of familiarity. That name echoes in his mind. He turns toward a mirror, and what he sees freezes him in place. The face staring back is not his own. The realization hits hard. He has become Weiss Vincent. This is the villainous noble from the school fantasy game Noblesse Oblige, a game he has cleared many times. Weiss is the early game antagonist who blocks the protagonist Alan during the Academy arc. A cruel noble who abuses his authority and delights in tormenting the weak. A character designed to be hated. And Weiss's future is already set. Defeat at Alan's hands. Total ruin. Forced service under the Demon King. And finally, a meaningless death as a living shield. Back in the present, the newly reborn Weiss looks again at the tied-up maid. Another realization slowly forms. If this world truly follows the game's story, then the girl in front of him can only be Lilith Scarlet. And if that's true, then he knows exactly how badly things are about to go wrong. Thinking back, Weiss remembers that tormenting Lilith was treated like a hobby by the original owner of this body. The thought alone makes his chest tighten. Even to him, it feels cruel and pointless, especially directed at someone so gentle. Acting on impulse, he starts to untie her. But then he hesitates. A sudden change like this could raise suspicion. The maid watches him in disbelief, unsure what to make of his actions. In the end, he stops midway and decides to leave things there for now. Today, at least, he won't go any further. But even that small decision already sets him apart from the Weiss she knows. As he looks at Lilith more closely, he notices a bruise on her neck. Her body is trembling, not from pain alone, but from fear. After a brief pause, he decides to try something risky. He uses healing magic. In an instant, the bruise fades away completely. It works. And just like that, he confirms something important. This is a hidden healing spell, one the developers never openly explained. It has been usable from the very beginning, buried quietly in the system. Thanks to a strategy book he once read, he recognizes it immediately. And now that he knows it exists, there's no turning back. Lilith stays quiet for a moment. Then her expression softens and she thanks him sincerely. She seems genuinely surprised not just by the healing magic but by the kindness itself. That reaction hits harder than expected. It becomes painfully clear just how badly Weiss must have treated her before. Obedience like this doesn't come naturally. It's learned. For the first time, Weiss apologizes to her, properly. He promises it won't happen again. Lilith is left confused, unable to fully understand the sudden change. But something has clearly shifted between them. And that change won't go unnoticed for long. Later, at the dining table, the household returns to its usual routine. Zevis Aldine, the Vincent family's butler, serves Weiss his meal. He looks tense, clearly bracing himself. Normally, this would end with insults and a plate smashed on the floor. But instead, Weiss reacts differently. He acknowledges Zevis by name. He treats the food with care. He even praises the seasoning. The room goes silent. Then Zevis bursts with emotion, overwhelmed by words he never expected to hear. The staff watches in disbelief, quickly turning admiration toward their young master. Weiss can't help but notice their reactions. To them it looks like Weiss has finally grown up. No one suspects that the person inside is completely different now. That realization makes one thing clear. The old Weiss must have been far worse than he imagined. Determined to change course, Weiss makes a decision. He declares that he will no longer make the servants suffer. His first step is simple but symbolic. He disposes of the baton he once used to hurt others. Tossing it away, he knows this alone isn't enough. Real change will take more than that. And there's little time to waste. As a noble, Weiss is required to attend a prestigious academy at the age of 15. The entrance exam is only 2 years away. The academy where the protagonist Alan shines. The academy where Weiss is destined to fall. Weiss knows exactly how his story is supposed to go. After losing to the protagonist during the combat test, his reputation is meant to collapse. Whispers spread. Disdain grows. And from there, everything falls apart. However, this time that loss hasn't happened yet. The future is still uncertain. And that means one thing. Weiss has no choice but to act. With that resolve, he finally throws away his baton for good. Even if it takes everything he has, he is determined to avoid the path that leads to ruin. Outside, his body is drenched in sweat. His limbs feel heavy as he takes a short rest from training. That's when someone calls him out, questioning whether he's even taking this seriously. Standing there is Isekai'd, an S-rank adventurer. One of the strongest swordsmen in the royal capital. Weiss insists that he is serious. But his body has reached its limit, and he asks for a short break. Milk allows it, but not without reminding him what will happen if he shows weakness after enrolling. That single remark is enough. Weiss pushes himself back to his feet and resumes training, refusing to be labeled a failure before he even begins. Using his family's connections, Weiss personally requested Milk to train him. In the game's original story, she appears much later, known as one of the closest figures to true strength in the capital. He demanded harsh training without mercy, and Milk delivers exactly that. Her methods are brutal, exhausting, and relentless, far beyond what Weiss ever experienced in either life. During one of these sessions, Lilith approaches quietly and hands him an item he asked for earlier. There is writing on it and she asks what it means. Weiss explains that it represents giving everything he has, even to the point of collapse. The words fit his situation perfectly. Noblesse Oblige is known as a death game for a reason. It's an extremely difficult title that requires repeated playthroughs to clear. One mistake can lead to instant failure, expulsion at best, death at worst. Weiss understands this better than anyone. He cannot afford to waste time. What he also realizes is how unprepared he truly is. He has never trained his body properly, not in this life and not in his past one either. The training is overwhelming. But strengthening his foundation is necessary if he wants to learn swordsmanship and magic efficiently. His days settle into a punishing routine. He starts by practicing basic forms. Then he runs endlessly to build stamina. That's followed by brutal muscle training that pushes him to his limits. Morning to night. Again and again. No shortcuts. No excuses. When night falls, Zevis prepares a special dinner, carefully following Weiss's instructions. Meals rich in protein, designed to support recovery. Weiss apologizes for causing extra trouble despite Zevis already being busy. 2 weeks pass like this. Injuries are quickly treated with recovery magic. But Weiss understands that healing alone isn't enough. Proper diet matters just as much. Thanks to Zevis's constant support, he barely manages to endure even this level of overwork. And yet, this is only the beginning. 3 weeks pass since the training began. Every single day feels unbearably long, yet somehow time keeps moving. Before Weiss realizes it, the sun is already setting. His body has finally adjusted to the physical strain, at least enough to stand upright without collapsing. That's when he decides it's time to move on to the next step. Magic training. After enduring Milk's merciless sword training, Weiss quietly hopes the magic teacher will be gentle. Anything would be better than this. Zevis announces that the teacher has arrived, and Weiss prepares himself to meet someone new. But the moment the figure steps forward and removes her hat, his expectations shatter instantly. It's Isekai'd. Again, the same instructor. Sword and magic alike. The truth quickly becomes clear. Milk isn't just a master swordsman. She's also a genius magic swordsman, capable of using 2 of the 4 great magic attributes. Zevis didn't misunderstand the request. By all standards, she's the best possible teacher. Just not the kind one Weiss was hoping for. Milk offers to teach him gently. Somehow she even catches things said under his breath. Weiss wants to believe her. He really does. But that hope doesn't last long. Magic training begins and it is anything but gentle. Weiss is pushed to focus, to channel mana properly, to keep his eyes open no matter how much his body protests. The pressure is overwhelming. Sweat pours down. His concentration breaks again and again. Compared to this, sword training almost feels merciful. Milk forces him to continue for hours. She explains that magic depends entirely on mana, and the only way to increase it is through constant, repeated training. There are no shortcuts, no tricks, just endurance. The training doesn't stop until he collapses. And then it starts again. From that day onward, Weiss's routine becomes even harsher. Alongside basic magic training, practical combat with wooden swords is added back in. His body barely has time to recover. Every mistake is punished immediately. Every opening is pointed out the hard way. When Weiss is knocked down again, Lilith rushes over and heals his injuries. Milk also supports him with healing magic, making it clear that recovery will not be an excuse to stop. With support like that, all Weiss can do is keep going. And somewhere in the middle of this relentless routine, Weiss notices something strange. In his past life, he avoided effort. He ran away the moment things became difficult. He gave up before even trying. He lived like a shell, barely moving forward. But now, despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, he keeps standing back up. He keeps training. He keeps pushing forward. The question lingers quietly in his mind. What changed? And why is he no longer running away? 2 months pass since the training began. Weiss sits on the ground, catching his breath, his body worn but steady. Milk approaches and casually pats his head. She smiles, noting that he managed to last 2 hours this time. Compared to before, that alone is a clear improvement. Weiss can't help but question whether this is what she meant by teaching him gently. Milk confirms it without hesitation. Every time he reaches a goal, he gets a pat as a reward. Still, Weiss feels something is off. The balance between pain and reward doesn't seem fair. Milk immediately denies that. Before he can respond, Lilith arrives with his lunch, quietly placing it beside him. Milk explains it then. She's only the one holding the stick. The rest of the world is already giving Weiss plenty of carrot. She reminds him not to forget that side of things. The support that keeps him moving forward, even when his body screams to stop. And in that moment, Weiss finally understands. It isn't just his own will carrying him through this. Lilith always by his side, supporting him without complaint. Zevis preparing meals and adjusting his schedule to keep him going. Milk forcing herself to be strict, even harsh, for the sake of his growth. None of this would have been possible alone. The old Weiss and even the Weiss from his past life only thought about themselves. That's why no one stood with them. No one corrected them. No one supported them. What he truly needed wasn't kindness alone or cruelty alone, but both. Sweetness and severity mixed together. Until now, his goal had been simple. Survive. Avoid ruin. Avoid death. A goal meant only for himself. But that changes here. He doesn't want Lilith to suffer. He doesn't want Zevis or Milk to be disappointed. He wants to show them the version of himself that keeps moving forward. Not just for survival, but for everyone who has helped him reach this point. And just as that resolve settles in, Milk calls out again. The next goal is 4 hours. And she fully intends to push him all the way there. The road ahead is still brutal. But this time, Weiss is no longer walking it alone. Weiss, Milk, and Lilith walk through the bustling streets of the League Belt town. Weiss can't help but think to himself that in some strange way, this feels like a fun little date. 2 girls by his side in what he jokingly considers absolute territory. This town is infamous in the game as the first place the protagonist visits, a rough and tumble hub full of chaos and opportunity. Not long after entering, they hear a commotion, a heated argument about cheating, escalating into a fight between 2 men. Weiss notes, with no small amount of amusement, that security here is still as bad as ever. Curious, he asks Milk who his opponent might be. It's been 3 months since Weiss started his grueling training, and now it seems the right time for a practical test in this city. He wonders if this is just a minor trial, maybe some scuffle with random thugs, but then he catches Milk's strange, confident smile. His curiosity turns to unease. Milk reassures him not to worry. She's planning to select the very best opponent for him, someone worthy of his current skill level. Lilith cheers him on from behind, her encouragement lifting his spirits slightly. But Weiss can't fully relax. The tension sits heavy in his chest. Nearby, a group of men notices them. They can't help but gawk at Lilith, whose presence stands out even among the rough crowd. One of them mutters that Weiss is showing off by bringing a beauty along. Weiss and Lilith hear it, but neither reacts. Inside, Weiss thinks to himself that they should watch their words carefully. Milk could take them out in an instant. The League Belt town is notorious, a den of thugs and criminals. Even with Milk's overwhelming strength, Weiss knows he must protect Lilith at all costs. He clenches his fists, his determination sharp. Lilith, for her part, rolls her eyes at the annoyances of the men, but Weiss notices something else. The air around her seems to thrum with an almost imperceptible, dangerous aura. He wonders briefly if it's just his imagination. The scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild. A group of 3 men confronts a young boy, demanding he step outside. Weiss recognizes them immediately, the Boudin brothers, the very opponents he has been preparing to face. From a nearby window, Milk surveys the situation. She lists off their crimes silently: rape, robbery, kidnapping, murder, slave trading. The scale of their evil is staggering. Until now, their actions went unchecked, shielded by bribes and corrupt officials. But those officers have already been dealt with. All that remains is to handle the 3 brothers. The calm before the storm is fading. What comes next will decide just how far Weiss has truly come. Weiss faces the reality of the situation. These are extreme criminals, dangerous, ruthless, and utterly without mercy. Perfect opponents for his first real battle. For a brief moment, a smile crosses his face. But instinctively he wants to turn back to avoid the confrontation entirely. Milk stops him. She tells him to listen, reminding him that determination alone isn't enough. Weiss has trained tirelessly, but he has no true combat experience. Real battle is inevitable, and if he hesitates now, he might never get another chance. Worse, the next time could be his first fight without anyone watching over him. Without guidance, he could easily die. She presses him forward, reassuring him that she is here now, that she will intervene if things get too dangerous. Her words give him courage, but when he looks again, Milk and Lilith have vanished. Weiss has been tricked. He's left alone with the Boudin brothers, lured into a fight under the assumption he has backup. He tries to steady himself, nerves taut. There's no going back now. Fear isn't an option. The only choice is to brace himself for what's coming. The goal is simple but brutal: disable one of them by cutting off an arm. Death is not the objective, but this is 3 versus 1, and Weiss has no idea if he can win in a fair fight. These thugs may look like ordinary punks, but their skill is real. The alley ahead promises only violence. He needs a plan fast. And then he remembers Milk's words: follow her guidance, trust in the preparation, and he'll be fine. Meanwhile, Milk and Lilith watch from a distance. Lilith grumbles at the cruelty of the deception, but Milk explains that without this push, Weiss would never have mustered the motivation to act. A practice where someone always comes to help isn't real practice at all. Milk even smiles faintly, saying that if things really go south, she'll probably intervene, but only as a last resort. Behind them, another group of men notices the 2 watching Weiss. They recall seeing these 2 earlier in town. One of them comments on Lilith's beauty, another remarks on perfect timing, while the third quietly sizes up the situation. The group of men finally reveals who they are: the notorious band of thieves who control this part of the town. Behind them, 3 girls sit with their hands tied, victims of the gang's cruelty. One of the men casually remarks that they were just short on girls to hang out with tonight, as if this were some trivial annoyance. Then, blood. A splatter. 2 of the Boudin brothers turned horrified. Their other brother's hand has been severed. Weiss remembers Milk's lesson: move first. In battle, the first strike that catches your opponent off guard surpasses any attack. Even a master of magic dies if struck before raising a barrier. Even a master of martial arts falls if their neck is broken before they brace themselves. Milk drilled it into him: act decisively, act quickly, and act before your enemy. Seizing the moment, Weiss attacks. The remaining brothers erupt in anger and encircle him. Weiss responds with calculated precision, kicking one brother behind him and turning the fight into a whirlwind of strikes. Even as fists and weapons clash, Weiss's mind sharpens. He realizes how often he's postponed decisions, expecting some tomorrow version of himself to handle them. But time doesn't solve anything. From now on, if a choice must be made, it must be made in seconds. No hesitation. No excuses. This is the new Weiss. The battle rages, but Weiss moves with clarity and purpose. And then finally, it's over. The Boudin brothers are defeated. He succeeds. In his mind, he reflects on why it worked. If he had walked into the alley without striking first, all 3 would have surged with mana, bolstering their defenses. Faced with their coordinated readiness, Weiss would have had no chance. His victory came from one key principle: he moved before the enemy. Nearby, Milk's voice carries praise, though restrained. Full points, she says, but only 70. She quips that if it were her, the fight would have ended in the Adventurers Guild itself, a more proactive approach. Lilith, however, cheers him wholeheartedly, giving him a perfect 200 points in her eyes. Weiss notices blood on Lilith's clothes and asks if she's hurt. She brushes it off, claiming it's just his imagination, though he knows better. The aftermath spreads quickly. Newspapers report that more than 20 members of the notorious band of thieves have been arrested. No fatalities, but the gang was beaten into submission. And, incidentally, the infamous Boudin brothers are among those captured, thanks in large part to Weiss Vincent. One unknown girl reads the report and wonders aloud, who exactly is this Weiss? The news reaches the Vincent family. A letter of thanks arrives, accompanied by a cash gift, recognition, reward. The first proof that Weiss's training, his resolve, and his actions are beginning to reshape not just his future, but his reputation as well. The boy who was once lazy, aimless, and cruel is slowly becoming someone entirely different. 1 year and 6 months have passed since Weiss began his grueling training. The growth is nothing short of overwhelming. Day after day, his routine hasn't softened. Endless physical conditioning, relentless sword practice, and harsh magic drills. But now, even when he pushes himself to exhaustion, passing out from mana depletion or fatigue, he faces it with confidence. Those moments of weakness are behind him. Weiss has reached a point where he can detect enemies through walls, sense mana flowing through his body, and feel his own growth in real time. Evening comes, and while eating dinner, Zevis quietly approaches to ask how magic training is going. Weiss confirms it's progressing well, but admits that Milk's Spartan methods are still punishing. She trains him in all 4 elements, fire, water, wind, and earth equally. It's insane even for an S-rank adventurer like her. Weiss demonstrates his control over all 4 elements and Zevis watches, amazed. Weiss can only shake his head, calling Milk a demon far worse than the Boudin brothers he once defeated. Zevis smiles, explaining why such extreme training is necessary. Weiss isn't ordinary. Most people can only wield 1 element. Even Milk, a genius swordsman mage, is limited to 2. But Weiss has the potential to wield all 4, and more. A rare talent like that would have gone to waste if he had stayed lazy. Zevis remembers the old Weiss, careless and indifferent, and can hardly believe the dedication now before him. Turning to Weiss, he admits it, he has truly become admirable. But Weiss is already gone, leaving the dinner behind. Outside, Weiss scrambles nervously, apologizing while Lilith shields him. Milk swings a wooden sword, aiming for a playful but firm reprimand. Weiss begs for mercy, signaling that he has been practicing magic behind her back. Milk frowns, then insists he show her what he's been hiding. Weiss stands, and his hands glow as he releases not 2, not 4, but 6 elements. Light and dark join the traditional 4. Milk's eyes widen in recognition. He can now wield the special elements as well. She asks why he kept it a secret. Weiss explains that he wanted to present it only when it was fully ready. Even now it's not perfect, but perfection is no longer his goal, growth is. And one glance at his glowing hands, the flowing mana, and the steady gaze tells Milk that Weiss has gone far beyond the limits anyone expected. The boy who once avoided effort has become a force even his teachers struggle to contain. The tension hangs in the air as Milk repeats her question, incomplete? Weiss nods. He hasn't quite mastered it yet, but now, with both Milk and Lilith watching, he knows it's time to push it to completion. Combining light and dark magic, he channels what is truly his own, his original magic. Every movement, every spark of mana reflects 1.5 years of relentless training. And when the technique is finally unleashed, Milk and Lilith are left speechless. The sheer precision and power of his creation is breathtaking. Time passes. Day becomes night, and somewhere in a quiet house, a gathering is underway. The chatter of the crowd fills the room, but Weiss can't help yawning. Lilith notices and asks if he stayed up too late the night before. Weiss wonders if yawning is inappropriate for such a formal setting, but quickly assures her it's nothing, he's fine. The magic he created has fully matured. Light's healing power manifests as healing light, restoring allies. Dark magic brings dark haze, a curse and poison capable of wearing down enemies. And the fusion of both, dark heals allies while simultaneously inflicting a lingering curse on foes. It is a technique unlike any other. Yet Weiss knows the cost. Mana drains at a staggering rate, leaving him utterly exhausted. In his mind, he already realizes that more training is needed, not just to master technique, but to increase his mana capacity itself. Lilith, ever resourceful, comes up with an idea to wake him up. Strong booze. She dashes off, moving with the speed and precision of an assassin. Weiss watches, intrigued by her agility, and briefly wonders if she could be one of the hidden guards referenced in the Vincent family's backstory. He considers the possibility, then dismisses it. At that moment, a woman approaches, calling his name. Weiss looks up to see a vision of beauty, Cynthia, daughter of Countess Violetta. Her shimmering hair, her piercing red eyes, every detail matches the heroine from the game. There is no mistaking it, Cynthia Violetta herself. She speaks politely, commenting that it has been a long time since they last saw each other. Her eyes scrutinize him as she jokes about his tired appearance, comparing him to someone who had crushed a goblin into a muddy mess. Weiss trembles inwardly. In the game he was hated by every character, but Cynthia hated him the most. She was the one who caused his demise. And now here she is standing before him. He reminds himself, it's still before enrollment. He hasn't yet given her reason to despise him. This encounter could have gone disastrously wrong, but for now, Weiss convinces himself to stay calm. The future hasn't yet written itself, and he still has a chance to change everything. Weiss freezes as a memory hits him like a thunderclap, vivid, painful, and impossible to ignore. He sees the previous Weiss, acting exactly as he once did in the game, forcing Cynthia into his room, covering her mouth, trying to taint her with those filthy hands. His stomach churns. He can barely process it. Cynthia's voice cuts through the memory, sharp and unforgiving. She calls him a trash noble, condemns him for even daring to attend the party. Weiss feels the weight of it all, how much the previous Weiss ruined his chances, how deep Cynthia's loathing runs. He can feel it pressing down, suffocating. All he can do is bow his head and apologize sincerely. He admits it's all his fault, acknowledges the act as unworthy of a noble, and expresses true regret. Forgiveness may be impossible, but this is the only way forward. Cynthia studies him carefully. Slowly she realizes this Weiss is not the same as before. His genuine remorse shows in his posture, his tone, his very presence. A faint smile breaks across her face, a signal, subtle but unmistakable, that she senses a change. Weiss breathes a small sigh of relief. Even just a little, this might reduce the risk of his downfall. For now, it's all he can do. He knows he should leave quickly, retreat before he oversteps. Part of him wants to get closer to Cynthia, the heroine he once admired in the original story. But reality intrudes, they are light and dark. He is a disgraced noble, she a well-bred young lady. Like Icarus flying too close to the sun, any reckless approach could only end in disaster. Withdrawal seems inevitable. And yet, just as he prepares to step back, Cynthia reaches for his hand. Time seems to stop as they lock eyes. Lilith, watching from behind, can't hide her surprise. Weiss, stunned, feels his heart skip. Cynthia speaks softly, asking if he would dance with her. Weiss can hardly believe it. The girl he has long admired, the one who once hated him most, she is asking him to dance. Cynthia begins to move gracefully in front of him, radiating beauty and charm. Every motion is deliberate, captivating. Weiss's mind races, his heart pounding as he realizes this is no ordinary interaction. It's an invitation, a moment where the past and present collide, and his future might finally begin to shift. Cynthia and Weiss sit together, sharing a quiet moment over tea. The sunlight filters gently through the window, birds chirp outside, and for a brief moment, everything feels calm. Weiss repeats Cynthia's observation awkwardly, nodding along, though his mind drifts elsewhere. He can't help but wonder why she's here. To understand, we have to go back to that fateful night. Weiss first met Cynthia by chance, but somehow that meeting led to a formal dance invitation. There, she noticed his puzzled expression and almost teasingly pointed out that she knew he had changed. Rumors among the nobles had reached her ears. She knew about his relentless training to enter the academy, about the discipline he carried even in daily life. During the dance, Cynthia brings up a memory Weiss can barely face. She asks if he remembers that day, the incident he'd rather forget. Weiss admits he doesn't, and struggles to apologize for what happened. Then, in a moment that hangs between them, she draws him closer, forcing him to confront what he may have buried deep inside. She asks if he remembers declaring his feelings for her. Weiss is confused, and before he can process it, the dance ends. Applause fills the room, but Cynthia simply leaves, quietly stealing his heart as she goes. It's a moment that changes everything, but it's far from over. Back at Weiss' house, a letter from his father, Egidio Vincent, waits. It's an invitation to a dinner with Cynthia right there in his home. Weiss is shocked. He didn't expect this, and the timing couldn't be worse. But then, as if on cue, Cynthia is already outside. Weiss can't hide his irritation. Something about this feels wrong. The household scrambles to prepare. Lilith notices an extra letter tucked inside the envelope, hinting at yet another layer of intrigue. And that brings us to the present. Weiss and Cynthia sitting together for tea. Weiss is genuinely happy, but that happiness is tangled in frustration and fear. Because Weiss knows he can't afford to get close. Cynthia was supposed to end up with Alan, and changing that future could unravel everything. Even his victory over Alan in a test could alter the course of events. But taking the heroine away entirely, that would shatter the scenario he's counting on. And the realization makes Weiss burn with anger, trapped between the heart he wants to follow and the future he's supposed to preserve. It's a quiet tea, but the tension beneath the surface is anything but calm. And as Weiss watches Cynthia, he knows one thing for certain. Nothing will ever be the same. Weiss knows he's in trouble. Too disliked and it would be bad. Too liked and it's just as dangerous. He can't let Cynthia get too close. He has to maintain the perfect distance. But before he can strategize, Cynthia calls him out. She reminds him of a confession he made long ago, the one about falling for her at first sight. She asks if he's forgotten it. Weiss tenses instantly. She points out that back then, his words were too sudden, too arrogant, and honestly, a little unsatisfying. Yet she adds that if he's willing to offer a sincere apology now, even she wouldn't oppose it. Weiss can barely process a single word. Cynthia's elegance is almost intimidating, yet her soft side surfaces at the right moment, and it terrifies him. In his mind, he recalls the original story. Cynthia falls for people at an alarming speed, becoming devoted almost instantly. That devotion is dangerous for him. He has to somehow lower her affection before it spirals out of control. But Cynthia is relentless. She admires his quiet, shy side, calling it cute. Weiss panics. His favorability is rising on its own, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. A flustered moment follows. Weiss lets out an awkward moan just as Lilith refills his tea. Embarrassment floods him. Maybe, he reasons, if Cynthia heard that, her feelings would cool. But when he looks, she's still gazing at him with admiration, muttering that he's cute. Weiss groans internally. She's hopeless. He has to act fast. Lilith stays quiet, just listening as Cynthia changes the topic. She asks if Weiss knows about today's matter with his father. Weiss doesn't. She explains. The dinner is meant to be their formal introduction, a plan their parents decided without consulting them. And after speaking with Weiss today, she has chosen to agree. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Weiss' father, Agito Vincent, is having his own thoughts. Watching his bodyguards work, he shakes his head at his troublesome son. Weiss looks handsome like him, he muses, but shy when it comes to matters of the heart. Finally, Weiss gets the chance to dance with the famous Cynthia, and Agito couldn't let it wait. Without hesitation, he arranged their engagement. One bodyguard asks if Weiss approved, and Agito simply states that he's the father. He can tell what Weiss wants just by looking at him. He brushes off complaints, returning to the task at hand, finishing the sand art tunnel in the playground. Back in Weiss' house, the tension lingers. A dinner party meant to unite two families quietly looms, and Weiss can only brace himself. One thing is clear. He's caught between duty, strategy, and the girl who might already be stealing his heart. Outside Weiss' house, Cynthia has just left, and his face hardens in anger. What his father arranged wasn't some casual tea, it was a full engagement with Cynthia. In noble families, it's common for parents to choose marriage partners. But this wasn't political or about power. Weiss realizes his father did it simply to make him happy. Weiss had barely known Agito before. The man hardly appeared in the original story and never came home, leaving Weiss to wonder what kind of father he even was. Now, seeing the indulgence and care behind the arrangement, Weiss finally understands why the previous Weiss became a villain. Too much indulgence left unchecked. It shaped him. Just then, Weiss notices Lilith, tears streaming down her face. Shocked, he hears her quietly plead for him to be happy with Cynthia before running off. Weiss barely registers her speed, distracted more by the sight of her tears. At the gate, Milk appears, laying down an ultimatum. Today's quota, she says, is to chase after Lilith. And Weiss quickly learns why Lilith was crying. The girl she had supported for a year and a half, was suddenly being taken by a mysterious young lady who appeared out of nowhere. Milk warns Weiss he can't ignore Lilith's feelings, even if the engagement itself wasn't his decision. Refuse and the punishment is death. Without hesitation, Weiss agrees. He sprints after Lilith, and in the rush of motion, a realization hits him. Milk is right. Lilith has always been by his side, helping him grow. He owes her more than he ever acknowledged. Lilith sees him chasing, and for a moment, Weiss remembers just how much she shaped him. Without her support, he would still be his lazy, half-hearted self. His determination grows, but just as he's about to catch up, she darts away with impossible speed, demanding he leave her alone. Weiss can't believe it. How can he be chasing so desperately and still fall behind? The chase takes them through forests and along rivers. Weiss pleads with her to listen just once. Lilith says it's fine, that there's nothing she can do. After all, she's just a maid. Weiss refuses the idea, calling her far more than that. She's precious to him. He explains, anger simmering, that the engagement was entirely his father's decision, not his. Then he asks her another question, sharp and demanding. Does she even know about the servant system at the Noble Academy? The tension hangs in the air. At the Noblesse Magic Academy, only the highest-ranking nobles are allowed a personal servant, and Weiss intends for that servant to be Lilith. She is the one he trusts most, and he declares it without hesitation. Lilith is touched by his words, but she asks a simple question. Does this mean he's seeking her? Weiss, still panting from the chase, confesses that yes. That is exactly why he's been chasing her all this time. She then asks if he plans to chase her forever. Weiss struggles to catch his breath, dizzy from the sprint, but he manages to answer. Yes, he will. Understanding finally dawns on Lilith. If Weiss insists that much, then she agrees. From now on, she will serve as Weiss' personal companion. But before she can finish her words, disaster strikes. Weiss loses his footing and falls off a cliff, unconscious. Without hesitation, Lilith leaps after him, catching him in midair. She holds him tight and assures him to be at ease. She promises that she will do her best to protect their secret, keeping their bond hidden from everyone. In that midair embrace, Weiss awakens, and for a moment, the world narrows to just the two of them. Then, with a splash, they fall into the water. In that instant, everything changes. Weiss becomes officially engaged to Cynthia, but his heart is now secretly entwined with Lilith. A dangerous, thrilling secret love has begun. Elsewhere, the original game protagonist is pushing himself to the limit. Fully aware of the academy entrance ahead, he trains with relentless intensity, preparing for what's to come. The stage is set. Weiss is caught between duty and desire, while the original protagonist sharpens his skills, unaware of the tangled web of love and engagement closing in around Weiss. The other day, everything spiraled out of control. Somehow, Weiss ended up engaged to Cynthia and secretly involved with Lilith. The whole situation is so absurd that even Weiss can't wrap his head around it. He silently blames his father, knowing that when Egido returns from his diplomatic work, there's going to be a long list of complaints waiting for him. Meanwhile, training continues. Milk announces that basic drills are over and it's time for practical sparring. She asks Cynthia and Lilith if they've sparred before. They both confirm they have. Weiss can hardly believe Lilith has experience. But complications don't stop there. Both Cynthia and Lilith requested additional training in preparation for the upcoming entrance test. Cynthia, already more than capable, doesn't really need it. Lilith, who was meant to simply serve Weiss as his attendant, insists on joining him academically to support him, and Weiss allows it. Technically, neither of them needs this training, but Cynthia's extra effort could make her an even more formidable force than in the original story. Weiss is lost in thought when Milk calls him out, throwing him a sword. He catches it instinctively, but there's no time to relax. Milk announces the first sparring match, Weiss versus Cynthia. She reminds him not to be captivated or hold back, despite her being his fiancée. Embarrassment floods him. Behind him, Lilith cheers him on quietly, giving him a boost of confidence. Milk commands them to face each other. Then she adds something cryptic. Weiss doesn't need her to say, "Begin." He's puzzled, questioning what she means, but before he can get an answer, Cynthia launches herself at him, spinning through the air with a precise strike. Weiss reacts quickly, blocking her attack. Milk steps in with advice mid-action. The most important part of any fight is the first move. Before he can process it, Cynthia disappears from sight. Weiss' eyes darken as he searches for her, tension building. Suddenly, she reappears behind him, ready to strike, but Weiss dodges just in time. Cynthia specializes in ice magic, her signature technique, infusing her legs with magic, allowing her to glide at incredible speed like she's skating, and strike from blind spots Weiss can hardly predict. Yet, despite her dazzling speed, Weiss manages to dodge every attack. He finally spots an opening and taps her on the head. Cynthia cries out in surprise. Weiss panics, apologizing immediately, insisting it was just a light tap. Milk interrupts, explaining that swinging his wooden sword at a high-speed target effectively turned it into a counterattack. Cynthia is frustrated. She's sparred countless times at home, but this is the first time anyone has dodged her attacks so easily. Lilith steps forward to heal Cynthia's head. Cynthia thanks her, and Lilith simply shrugs, saying it's no problem. Milk then turns to Weiss with a question. How did he read Cynthia's high-speed movements? Weiss is confused, stammering, "Ha." Milk waves it off, saying they'll see if it was just a fluke, and announces the next fight. Weiss versus Lilith. Weiss freezes. With Lilith? He asks incredulously, already panting from the previous spar. Milk dismisses his complaints, reminding him he's not that tired, and insists he get on with it. As Weiss faces Lilith, she calmly says she's looking forward to the match. Weiss mutters a distracted, "Yeah, sure," under his breath. He tells himself not to take her seriously. After all, she's just a maid. But memories of Lilith's actions time and time again tell him otherwise. If he lets his guard down, he knows he could be in real danger. Suddenly, Lilith disappears from his sight. Weiss' eyes widen as she darts around him with unbelievable speed, leaping and striking from every angle. He blocks an attack from her side, frustration building. Then another attack comes. Weiss barely manages to block again. Milk watches quietly, realizing Weiss' ability to track Lilith's lightning-fast movements isn't just a fluke. Weiss, however, is irritated and confused. In the original story, Lilith was just his attendant, barely appearing at all. He never imagined she could be this strong. Though she's only just begun learning magic, her speed surpasses Weiss, and her knowledge of swordsmanship is more advanced than he ever expected. Weiss is beginning to see that the quiet maid he took for granted might be one of the deadliest opponents he's ever faced. Weiss suddenly realizes that if he doesn't take this seriously, he will lose. Dark energy swirls around his hands as he raises them, and he casts a spell, Dark Heal. Lilith halts mid-attack, her eyes widening in recognition. This is Weiss' original magic, a skill that heals allies inside a magic circle, while simultaneously dealing curse damage to enemies. Lilith considers escaping the circle, but she quickly notices a critical weakness. Weiss has temporarily let go of his wooden sword to cast the spell, leaving him completely defenseless. Normally, she could take advantage of this, but escaping now as a close combat fighter would only leave her vulnerable to his magic from inside the circle. She decides this is her only opening and charges at him. Weiss smirks confidently as he blocks her attack with a shimmering shield. Lilith bounces off in shock. Weiss calls it Absolute Barrier, a fusion of dark and light magic, combined with the precision of his dark eye. Even if his body can't match Lilith's speed by using the dark eye with Absolute Barrier, he can defend against her relentless attacks as long as he has enough mana. Milk observes the battle, questioning Lilith. Is that all she can do? But suddenly she realizes something is wrong. She shouts at Weiss to cancel the magic. Weiss is confused, until Lilith collapses, dizzy and exhausted. Milk rushes to her side and Weiss kneels beside her. Later, Lilith rests beneath a tree, admitting she's been completely defeated. Weiss apologizes, asking if she's all right. Milk reassures him. She's fine now, thanks to an advanced healing potion. Then Milk asks a question that lingers in the air. What exactly was that magic? Weiss explains. Dark Heal not only saps vigor, it inflicts a laundry list of debuffs on anyone inside the circle. Reduced physical and magical defenses, lowered vitality and mana, slower attack and movement speed. Lilith's relatively high mana reserves delayed her collapse, but it was enough to bring her down in seconds. Then Weiss adds another revelation. He can absorb the stats he drains from enemies and add them to himself. The more enemies inside the circle, the stronger he becomes. Allies within the circle can share in the enhancements. His power is terrifying and precise. As Weiss surveys Milk, Cynthia, and Lilith, a quiet thought crosses his mind. This is it, the moment everyone dreams of saying after reincarnating into another world, the ultimate line. He wonders if it's finally his turn to claim it. Milk, seeing his growth, steps forward with fire in her eyes. It's been a long time since she's felt this challenged. With a menacing smile, she declares that Weiss will take responsibility for his newfound strength and urges him to unleash it to prove himself. But in a blink of an eye, half of his body got buried from where he was standing. Then Cynthia and Lilith rushed to help him. Meanwhile, Cynthia and Lilith continue enduring Milk's grueling training every day, pushing themselves to the limit. And all the while, the misunderstandings between Lilith, Cynthia, and Weiss remain unresolved. Days and months fly by almost unnoticed, until finally, the moment they've been preparing for arrives. the gates of the Noblesse Magic Academy. Days and months fly by almost unnoticed, until finally, the moment they've been preparing for arrives. The gates of the Noblesse Magic Academy, the day when Weiss and the protagonist's paths will finally collide. The Noblesse Magic Academy stands tall, boasting the largest campus in the world. It's the kingdom's most prestigious institution, a place every noble dreams of entering. And today, its gates open for the entrance test. Nearby, trouble breaks out. A bully confronts a boy, demanding to know what he's staring at. The boy calmly says he wasn't staring, he just thought the bully looked big. That only makes things worse. The bully swings his fist, but before it lands, Weiss steps in. He catches the punch midair and tightens his grip. The bully cries out in pain and demands to know who just stopped him. Whispers ripple through the crowd. It's Weiss Vincent, the infamous abusive noble. The girl beside him must be Cynthia of House Violetta, so the engagement rumors were real. And who's the other beauty? Some mutter that Weiss is something else for showing up with two stunning girls at the exam. The bully freezes in fear. Realizing he's facing the notorious Weiss Vincent, he panics, apologizing profusely and begging not to be abused. Weiss shuts it down immediately, telling him there's no chance he'd do something like that. He orders him to leave and the bully flees without looking back. Watching him go, Weiss reflects on how long it's been since his reincarnation, and yet the old Weiss reputation still lingers. If he wants to survive this world, he'll need to change how people see him, slowly and carefully. 2 years have passed since his training began, and now at last the day has arrived. The Noblesse Magic Academy entrance test. And here, today, Weiss must face a certain man. That man approaches him with a bright smile, thanking Weiss for saving him earlier. He introduces himself as Alan, the protagonist. Alan cheerfully confirms Weiss' name and says he hopes they both pass, offering his hand in friendship. Weiss hesitates. Just as their hands are about to meet, the warning bell rings. The exam is about to begin. The handshake never happens. Alan is pulled away by a girl urging him to hurry. Before leaving, she turns back and thanks Weiss for helping Alan. Her name is Cheryl Elias, Alan's childhood friend. As they disappear into the crowd, Weiss is left standing still. Something feels wrong. The hesitation lingers in his chest. Even talking to Alan filled him with an unbearable sense of unease. And Weiss doesn't understand why. It's not that he dislikes Alan. His goal today is to defeat him in the exam, but after that, Weiss intended to stay on friendly terms. Close enough to coexist, far enough to stay safe. But as the academy gates loom ahead, Weiss can't shake the feeling that this encounter has already begun to shift the course of the story. The entrance test is about to start, and the clash between fate and free will is finally underway. The Duke announces that the next stage is a practical combat test. Everyone is ordered to change into the provided uniforms, hand-me-downs from former students, designed to reduce both magical and physical damage. As Weiss puts his on, an unsettling feeling grips his chest. His heart pounds violently. Something is wrong. A dark urge rises within him, not just toward one opponent, but toward everyone here. The desire to crush them all surges without warning, and Weiss doesn't understand why. The feeling is foreign, violent, and impossible to suppress. The Duke reiterates the rules. Victory is achieved by knocking the opponent out of the ring or forcing them to surrender. If the situation becomes dangerous, he will intervene. Complaints arise immediately. Some students protest that the uniforms are too small, others that they smell. The Duke shuts it down, irritated, pointing out that it's too late to complain now. He even wonders aloud whether these examinees are really 15 given their size. If they pass, they'll receive brand new uniforms tailored to them. For now, they're told to endure. The exam begins. Nearby, Lilith remarks that it's impressive the academy prepared uniforms for every examinee. Cynthia agrees, adding that many students abandon their uniforms and vanish after enrollment. That alone speaks volumes about how brutal life inside the academy truly is. Weiss knows she's right. The Noblesse Magic Academy is the most prestigious and most merciless educational institution in the kingdom. Anyone who can't keep up is expelled without hesitation. The lessons are so severe that some students never make it out alive. Many discard their uniforms as they leave, never wanting to see them again. And yet, entering the academy itself isn't that difficult. Even the lazy version of Weiss in the original story managed to pass. Then the next match is announced. Examinee 909, Weiss Vincent, versus Examinee 907, Alan. Rain begins to pour. Instructors direct everyone except the current combatants to the spectator seats. The battlefield clears as Weiss and Alan step forward, facing each other under the falling rain. Support echoes from both sides. Lilith cheers Weiss on from behind. Cheryl urges Alan not to lose. Weiss, however, says nothing. The match begins. In an instant, Weiss strikes first. His wooden sword crashes into Alan's face, sending him flying across the field. Without hesitation, Weiss releases his sword and casts Dark Heal. A magic circle spreads beneath Alan's feet. Pain tears through Alan's body inside the circle. Shock ripples through the spectators. Cheryl, Cynthia, and Lilith all stiffen in disbelief. Even the referee standing nearby feels something deeply wrong while within the circle's range. But Weiss barely notices any of it. The burning urge inside him grows stronger. He knows it's wrong, but he can't stop it. The desire to crush Alan overwhelms everything else. Weiss questions it desperately. This feeling, it started earlier. Long before the match. Could this be the influence of the previous Weiss? Is this rage not truly his own? Within him, the shadow of the former Weiss bares its fangs. And before anyone can react, Weiss grabs Alan by the collar and lifts him off the ground. The exam has crossed a dangerous line. And whatever is awakening inside Weiss is no longer content with holding back. After the entrance exams finally come to an end, the academy is left in quiet disbelief. Inside the headmaster's office, attention turns to one name that shattered expectations. Weiss Vincent, the boy who topped every exam without exception. Gilles Noblesse, the headmaster of the Noblesse Magic Academy, looks straight at Milk and Zevis, the two who raised him. He wants to know what they did to create someone like this. What he doesn't expect is how little of an answer he gets. Gilles then raises a heavier concern. With power like Weiss's, danger naturally follows. The room grows tense, but before Milk or Zevis respond, Darius steps in. The academy instructor calmly points out that while Weiss's results are extraordinary, he technically didn't break every record. Gilles pauses, then remembers last year's prodigy. Weiss didn't stand alone at the top. He tied with another student. A detail that slightly shifts the mood but doesn't erase the unease. And just when it seems the tension might settle, it only digs deeper. Milk finally speaks, brushing off the mystery behind Weiss's growth. She claims she did nothing special, only gave him basic training. Zevis follows up just as casually, saying his role was even simpler. He supported Weiss with meals. Plenty of food. Plenty of protein. This only fuels Darius's confusion. When Zevis starts listing soy, dairy, and chicken tenders as if they're ancient secrets of power, the room nearly snaps. For abilities that include mastery over light and dark creation magic, food alone clearly isn't the answer. And now, everyone wants to know what's really being hidden. As the pressure rises, Milk quietly drinks her alcohol like none of this concerns her. Darius loses patience, calling out her behavior in front of the headmaster. Milk responds by simply resting her head on the table, while Zevis explains she brought it herself. Gilles steps in, telling Darius to lower his voice. This apparently is normal for her. The moment shifts from tension to awkward comedy, but it doesn't last long. Darius brings up the real issue eating at him. Alan, a talented student who nearly died because of Weiss. To Darius, this isn't just about scores or rankings. It's about responsibility. But before his frustration fully spills over, Milk cuts him off. She shuts down his accusations and calls out what it really sounds like. Jealousy. Losing a serious match doesn't justify blaming others. And suddenly, the room isn't debating Weiss's power anymore, but the cost of comparing oneself to it. Darius tries to argue that Weiss should have been guided better from the start, but this time Zevis steps in. He tells the headmaster that Weiss has never used his strength against the weak. More importantly, he isn't the same person he once was. Instead of being swallowed by his own abilities, Weiss now pushes himself forward through genuine effort. He's changing not into a weapon but into someone aiming to be strong and courageous. Meanwhile, inside a Noblesse Magic Academy classroom, the newly enrolled students are formally welcomed. The instructor in charge steps forward. Her name is Chloe. Calm, confident, and clearly experienced. She congratulates everyone on making it this far and makes it clear she'll be the one guiding this class from here on out. For the students, it feels like the start of something important. But that feeling doesn't last long. As the room settles, Weiss glances toward Alan sitting behind him. The memory of the entrance exam quietly resurfaces. Back then, Weiss had been overwhelmed by the emotions of his former self, pushing far beyond reason. He defeated Alan decisively, but what lingered was not the victory. No matter how many times Alan was knocked down, he kept standing back up, each time stronger than before. Weiss still won, but it took far longer than expected. The fight left behind an uncomfortable realization, as if Weiss had just witnessed firsthand what it meant to be someone who never gives up. And before that thought can settle, reality snaps back into place. With a sharp motion, Chloe brings everyone's attention forward. She reveals a glowing mark on the back of her hand. 1,000 points. That is what every student has been granted. Confusion spreads through the class as she explains that these points are a measure that will follow them all the way until graduation. Everyone starts equal. Everyone except one. Based on his exam results, Weiss has been granted 2,000 points. The room erupts. Shock, disbelief, and quiet resentment ripple through the students. Some question what the points even represent. Others wonder if this is some kind of grading system, and whether doubling Weiss's points is fair at all. The tension builds and Chloe lets it. Then she cuts it short. Rather than explaining everything, she decides experience will teach them faster. The class is instructed to take wooden swords and head to the training grounds. Nervous energy spreads as students move, unsure of what's coming next. Once everyone is assembled, Chloe declares the start of combat. She reminds them that while she congratulated them on enrolling, she never promised they would all graduate. By now, some of them already understand what that means. Any student whose points reach 0 will be expelled immediately. Today's lesson is simple and brutal. They will fight until someone runs out of points. And as fear and excitement collide on the training field, far away from the academy, Milk spends her time in her own way. Alcohol in hand, surrounded by unconscious men she casually dealt with, she feels the emptiness left behind since Weiss departed for the academy. The days feel longer, quieter, and in her own strange way she decides to fill that time productively by getting a teaching license at the Noblesse Magic Academy. And just like that, while the students prepare to fight for their future, a familiar presence begins moving closer to Weiss once again. Back in the classroom, a student approaches Weiss, carefully confirming his name. He introduces himself as Louis Mysant, explaining that he watched Weiss's mock battle and was deeply impressed. The praise comes easily. Highest score ever. Unbelievable performance. Louis carries a bright, refreshing presence, the kind that naturally draws attention. In the original story, he was meant to excel, graduate at the top, and shine as a student with top-tier potential. Someone important. Someone who was supposed to last. But this time things are different. As Cynthia and Lilith quietly keep their distance, Chloe suddenly appears. Her expression is calm, but her decision is final. Louis's points have already dropped to 0. The lesson from earlier was clear, and she has no intention of repeating it. Louis Mysant is expelled on the spot, defeated completely by Alan. The boy who was meant to go far is erased on the very first day. Later, at the canteen, Weiss sits in front of his meal, unable to focus. Everything is going wrong. He had tried to move carefully, sticking close to the original story, avoiding unnecessary changes. He defeated Alan as planned. That should have been enough. But now the main heroine has somehow become his fiancée, and Louis, who was supposed to stay until graduation, is already gone. The story isn't just drifting anymore. It's spiraling into chaos. Worse still, something dark begins to stir inside him. The emotions of the original Weiss grow louder, heavier. Ever since facing Alan, that inner presence has been pushing him toward aggression. Not just against Alan, but against everyone around him. The plan was to act kindly, to earn trust slowly and carefully. Yet now, the urge to crush everything in front of him feels dangerously close. Weiss knows what happens if he gives in. Hatred. Isolation. The same ending as before. Nearby, Cynthia hears his muttered frustration and reacts in a way Weiss never expects. She doesn't recoil. She doesn't scold him. To her, it doesn't sound wrong at all. If that's truly what he wants, then so be it. Weiss falls silent, thrown off by her response, while she calmly thanks the cook for the meal. Her lack of reaction only deepens his confusion. Cynthia then explains herself. This is the Noblesse Magic Academy, a place where kindness alone won't keep you alive. She admits she used to worry about Weiss because he was always too gentle. In a world built on competition, mercy can become a weakness. But after witnessing how he fought during the test, she began to see him differently. Stronger, sharper. Someone capable of standing his ground. Weiss listens quietly, absorbing her words. As the moment softens, a chef offers another bowl of pot au feu. Cynthia declines, unfazed. Lilith steps in next, sharing the same view. The world they've stepped into is unforgiving. If they choose to compete, then they must be prepared to be just as ruthless. In the end, what matters most is that Weiss follows his own will. Whatever path he chooses, she'll stand by him. One question lingers quietly in the air. If the story has already changed this much, what kind of future is he walking toward now? The chef keeps hovering nearby, still worried about the untouched pot au feu. There's clearly more than enough left. Lilith politely signals that she's already full. Cynthia, however, shifts the mood again. As Weiss's fiancée, she believes he should at least have the resolve to knock everyone else down. Weiss thanks both of them. Their words have helped more than they realize. He may not be able to accept everything immediately, but talking it through has steadied him. Lilith then offers a surprisingly simple solution. If Weiss truly can't decide, there's always the option of leaving it to chance. A coin is placed in front of him. Weiss understands the meaning instantly. The scenario is already half destroyed. The future is no longer predictable. If thinking too hard only leads to hesitation, then perhaps stopping altogether is the answer. Let fate decide the rest. The coin flips into the air, briefly stealing all attention. The chef, still desperate to see his dish eaten, leans in at the worst possible moment, begging them not to waste the pot au feu. The coin tumbles away and rolls across the floor. One side bears the kingdom's castle. The other, a dragon symbolizing absolute strength. Heads would mean resisting the impulse, trying to coexist even with Alan. Tails would mean surrendering to the urge to move forward without restraint. Before the result can settle, the coin is picked up. Alan stands there, returning it to Weiss. He managed to enroll despite being beaten badly during the exam. More importantly, he wanted to see Weiss again. Or rather, he wanted to fight him again. When the coin finally rests in Weiss's hand, the result is clear. Tails. And this time, Weiss doesn't hesitate. The decision feels strangely liberating. He even welcomes the idea of facing Alan again. The scene shifts violently to the battlefield. Weiss moves without mercy. A burst of magic drops one student instantly. Chloe calls the result. Chris Schlegel is expelled. A massive opponent charges next, throwing heavy punches, but Weiss slips in and strikes cleanly with his wooden sword. Gustav Gregorio follows him out. One by one, names are erased. Lehman Kudavareta, Karuna Kianich. Others fall just as quickly, some buried face first in the ground with only their heads sticking out. All expelled. By the end of it, 6 rivals are gone in a single day. Nearby, Cynthia watches in open admiration. Lilith calmly notes the result. Weiss has cleared the field with frightening efficiency. The fighting spreads into the forest. Weiss takes command, directing Cynthia and Lilith to flank the enemies and draw their attention. They move without hesitation. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Weiss acknowledges the truth. Thanks to Alan, he no longer doubts himself. There's no reason to hesitate now. He'll crush everything standing in his way and tear this broken scenario apart head-on. Elsewhere in the Noblesse Magic Academy, far from the chaos, a girl sits alone on her bed. She stares at the number glowing beside her name. 22 points. Barely holding on. She's already at her limit and knows it. Without help, expulsion is only a matter of time. And as Weiss reshapes the battlefield with overwhelming force, another fate quietly counts down in the shadows. The match ends with a clear victor, Team Weiss. 1 month has passed since enrollment, and already the academy feels smaller. 10 students have dropped out. 7 of them, all sent packing by Weiss himself. His dominance is becoming impossible to ignore. On the announcement board, murmurs ripple through the student body. Magic stealth training. Magic tracking training. Magic defense training. In every single category, Weiss Vincent holds the top spot. The whispers turn to exclamations. How is one person excelling everywhere? Not everyone is impressed, though. From his chair, Duke Billion, Cheryl's childhood friend, lets out a roar of frustration. He calls Weiss a menace, questioning if this is some second life and what kind of training regimen could produce such strength. He recalls Weiss slipping past Cheryl's magic threads during yesterday's flag battle, flattening Alan in an instant, and snatching the flag before anyone could even blink. Weiss's score? 5,700 points. First place across the entire year by a landslide. Duke wonders aloud just how much virtue Weiss accumulated in his previous life. Cheryl nearby tells Duke to quiet down. Alan apologizes for losing yet again, but Cheryl only smiles and tells him to focus on the next match. Then her gaze lands on Weiss. Fierce. Calculating. Weiss meets it without hesitation. In his mind, he compares himself to the old Weiss, the version that let negative emotions fester in secret, eventually being hated and ruined by those around him. Not this time. The current Weiss channels his power through fair matches. No guilt, no reason for hatred. He silently tells Cheryl, Don't stare at him like that. Meanwhile, across the room, Weiss notices Chloe speaking to another student, Carta Viol. Chloe's tone is sharp and serious, outlining what will happen if Carta fails to score in the next practical exam. Carta confirms she's fine. Chloe leaves. Weiss watches her quietly, recalling the original story. In that timeline, Carta was expelled after the following exam. She channeled her frustration into motivating her best friend, but ultimately she left the academy quietly, leaving no mark. A fair match, yes, but Weiss's presence shaped the outcome in ways Carta couldn't control. Nearby, two other students giggle and whisper, mocking Carta. They wonder what she'll do in the next exam, a tag battle, now that her partner has been expelled. The words are meant to sting. Carta feels a surge of irritation as one of the girls nearby mocks her. Her best friend was completely thrashed by Weiss in the last match, losing all her points in a single blow. The comment stings, but Weiss doesn't linger on it. Instead, he quietly approaches the two girls, then turns his attention to Carta. He offers his hand, asking if she wants to team up with him. They step away from the crowd, heading to a cliff for privacy. Carta doesn't hide her skepticism. She points out the obvious. She's on the verge of expulsion. Weiss is the top-ranked first year, and they're not a match at all. She even reminds him that he has Cynthia by his side. When she turns, she sees Cynthia behind a tree watching them, and the intensity in Cynthia's gaze frightens her. Weiss notices her hesitation. He asks what's wrong and whether she's concerned about his fiancée. He assures her that Cynthia only wants him to be the best. Partnering with another girl is simply a means to win. Carta hesitates, muttering about his recent bloodlust. But when she glances back, Cynthia has vanished. Confused, Carta wonders if she imagined it. Weiss keeps speaking, clarifying that he isn't helping her out of pity. He doesn't have the time or energy to feel sorry for every student at risk of expulsion. Still, he thinks it would be a waste if someone with her skill were to disappear unnoticed. Her flying magic, he points out, is truly exceptional, something even skilled mages struggle to control. To Weiss, someone who can wield it this well deserves the chance to show their ability. Carta remains uneasy, convinced she saw Cynthia just moments ago. Weiss continues, explaining that for the next exam, teaming up with her is simply the most efficient strategy because of her unique skill. And just like that, Cynthia appears again. She praises Carta's sensing ability, noting that she can pick up faint traces of magic even Weiss couldn't detect. Cynthia wonders if Carta's perception might even surpass Weiss's own dark eye vision. But then she points out what Carta hasn't noticed. Lilith, who has mastered assassination techniques, is right behind her. Carta jumps in surprise as Lilith steps forward. Lilith explains the upcoming tag battle is a joint exam for all 3 school years. Weiss, she notes, has chosen to partner with Carta because of her special ability rather than teaming with Cynthia or Lilith, who are already strong enough to handle second and third year opponents on their own. Cynthia and Lilith move closer, clarifying the pairings. Cynthia will work with Lilith while Weiss will partner with Carta. Weiss confirms his decision, emphasizing that time is short and special training must begin immediately. Tears well in Carta's eyes, but she agrees. And just like that, Weiss's special training with Carta starts, preparing them for the challenges of the upcoming exam. As Weiss and Carta walk together, the conversation drifts to flying magic. Weiss admits it's a tricky skill, but he's slowly starting to get the hang of it. Carta raises an eyebrow, pointing out that he couldn't even stay in the air for 2 seconds before. She reminds him that for the exam, she'll be flying with him anyway, so there's no real need for him to learn it. Weiss shrugs, saying she's right for now, but he also sees a rare opportunity to learn. Any magic, he explains, can become a powerful weapon depending on how you use it. And right now, he happens to have the perfect flying magic teacher, Carta herself. He apologizes for dragging her into training, even though it isn't directly related to the exam. Carta is speechless. Weiss continues, promising that tomorrow during the exam he won't let her get expelled. After that, he asks if she'd be willing to continue teaching him flying magic from time to time. A quiet laugh escapes Carta, and a small smile forms. She thinks about all the rumors she'd heard, about Weiss being lazy, careless, or entitled, and realizes how wrong they were. He's a hard worker, eager to learn, always pushing himself. For the first time, she feels inspired. If Weiss is willing to learn, then she wants to follow that example. She agrees, quietly saying she'd be happy to help. Nearby, Chloe observes the two of them walking outside, while Gil studies the records. Weiss-Vincent's scores are astonishing, especially for an underclassman. More than half of the expelled students, taken down by Weiss alone. Chloe nods, acknowledging his skill, but she also reminds Gills that this year's students are no pushovers either. The one who surprised her the most is Alan, Darius's apprentice. He has a relentless drive, repeatedly rising from the brink of failure and coming back stronger each time. But Chloe also notices two others who've grown remarkably: Lilith and Cynthia. From the moment they enrolled, they've trained at an impossible pace, risking life and limb without reinforced gear, fighting with real swords instead of wooden ones. That dangerous, no-holds-barred training has shaped them into formidable mages. After a sparring session, they heal each other. Cynthia turns to Lilith, complimenting her growth, but Lilith brushes it off, insisting that Cynthia herself is the impressive one. Cynthia smiles and declares she's going to grow even stronger, not as someone merely tagging along, but as a proud, capable individual who can stand equally beside Weiss. One morning, Lilith's determination shines clearly. She tells Cynthia that she wants to grow stronger, for Weiss. When he's in danger, she wants to be someone he can rely on, someone capable of protecting him. Stronger than she ever has been. Cynthia smiles, acknowledging her own growth, but Lilith insists she still has a long way to go. Together, the two of them set a small, immediate goal: make sure Carta stays away from Weiss's side, at least for now. Meanwhile, on the morning of the exam, Carta wakes trembling in her bed. A sudden chill runs down her spine and she wonders why she feels so uneasy. The scene shifts to Duke, Cheryl, and Alan, standing together before the next round. Duke suggests leaving the pairings up to fate with a game of rock, paper, scissors. One shot, no hard feelings, he says. Alan agrees, though Cheryl can't help but comment on how dramatic he always is. The game is quick and fate decides their teams. Nearby, Chloe announces the next pairing. Students are transported to their designated points on Mount Gariel. Weiss and Carta arrive at their assigned spot. Weiss reminds her of their plan: target the upperclassmen with the highest points and take them down efficiently. Carta nods, ready. From above, an announcement echoes across the mountain. Every student is in position. From this moment, the joint 3-year tag survival test officially begins. Elsewhere, Milk lounges in her hammock, casually reflecting on her day. Once again, she's eliminated a few more men without breaking a sweat. Her mind drifts to earlier plans, something she intended to do but had completely forgotten, until she remembers. She's aiming to get her teaching license at Noblesse Magic Academy. Even in chaos, she keeps her goals in mind. The tag survival test had already started when Ariel suddenly got electrocuted. Pain rushed through his body as he screamed, while his partner Vivid immediately noticed something was wrong. Another student had been standing behind him the entire time, but by then it was already too late for Ariel to realize it. An announcement was soon made. First-year student number 31, Ariel, and number 27, Vivid, were both unable to continue. They would be sent back to Noblesse Magic Academy. Liddy laughed at the outcome, thinking that first-years were easy targets who could not even see through such a simple trap. His partner reminded him not to underestimate them just because they were underclassmen. He also mentioned hearing rumors about an amazing student among the new first-years. Liddy brushed it off and believed there was probably nothing special about him. Liddy continued by saying that all the famous students from their own year had already been expelled anyway. His partner agreed, believing every single one of them had just been all talk. Then his partner tried to recall the first-year student's name, believing it was Weiss Vincent. But the moment he turned toward Liddy, he saw that Liddy had already been knocked to the ground after getting struck by Weiss. Weiss showed a menacing smile, leaving the second-year student stunned. Another announcement followed shortly after. Second-year student number 10, Liddy, was unable to continue. The second-year student became furious and immediately released a fire spell toward Weiss. Weiss managed to dodge it, and when the second-year student looked upward, he saw Weiss appearing from the sky above him. As expected from a second-year student of Noblesse Academy, even though it was only a basic fire spell, it carried extremely dense magical power. On top of that, the second-year student had cast it without using any incantation. Weiss noticed the star attached to the second-year student's shoulder, the symbol awarded only to students with excellent grades. At that moment, Weiss realized he was facing someone truly skilled, meaning there was no room to hold back. From above, Weiss prepared to land another attack. He created an unnatural wall beneath him, using it to bounce away and avoid the second-year student's attack. The second-year student stared in disbelief, unable to understand how Weiss had changed direction in midair. Then Weiss repeated the same movement once again before charging straight toward him. Weiss struck rapidly several times before passing straight through him. Moments later, the second-year student collapsed to the ground. Elsewhere, Carta had already buried half of someone's body underground. Weiss had never fully mastered flying magic, but instead he had developed a completely different technique. By combining dark, light, and non-elemental magic, Weiss created a transparent wall known as the unnatural wall. As he had just demonstrated, Weiss could make the wall appear in midair and use it as a foothold. However, the wall only lasted for the brief moment he kicked off from it. The farther Weiss moved away from the ground, the more mana the technique consumed, making it impossible for him to rise too high. But that was already more than enough. The technique had greatly expanded Weiss's tactical options, making all the effort he spent learning flying magic worth it after all. Then suddenly, Weiss sensed something resembling an attack coming from a student behind him. Before it could reach him, his barrier activated automatically and blocked it. The student was left in disbelief. At the same time, another incoming attack suddenly approached from nearby and struck the student directly, sending him flying and leaving him unable to continue. Looking from above, Weiss realized it was Carta, who immediately apologized to him. She explained that she had tried signaling him that another team was approaching, but since Weiss failed to notice, she decided to attack instead. Weiss told her not to worry, believing she had made the right call. Nearby, another student hiding behind the trees quietly listened to their conversation while Weiss expressed surprise that Carta had managed to take down the student with a single blow. Carta then asked whether the barrier activated automatically. The hidden student quickly understood what was happening and finally revealed himself. Stepping out from the trees, he observed that the defensive magic was also a combination of dark and light magic. He analyzed Weiss and Carta's abilities, concluding that although all of their techniques were extremely high-spec, they were also inefficient and could not be used repeatedly. Weiss realized that the student was likely the partner of the one they had just defeated. The student, Archimedes, warned Weiss not to get cocky just because he managed to beat trash opponents. According to him, Weiss's chances of defeating him were absolutely zero. Archimedes laughed as he unleashed a powerful aura. He confidently declared that once he removed his glasses, his combat ability multiplied by 3.14. While Archimedes continued talking, Weiss quietly prepared his next move before using Dark Heal. Archimedes immediately became confused as he felt his strength rapidly draining away. He could not understand what kind of skill Weiss had just used, since there had been no information about it in his data. At that moment, Weiss charged straight toward him to attack. Weiss remarked that Archimedes should return after doing more research. Then Weiss passed through him as Archimedes collapsed to the ground, unable to continue. Weiss declared that another opponent was down. Weiss then told Carta to keep up the pace and continue collecting massive amounts of points from careless upperclassmen. When Carta checked her points, she was shocked to see the number jump from 22 to 1,336. Elsewhere in the forest, Alan and Cheryl encountered Lilith and Cynthia approaching them. As the two groups faced each other, Cynthia suggested having a quick bout to pass the time. Meanwhile, Weiss continued eliminating opponents in another area. He told Carta that second and third-year students had completely stopped appearing. Carta replied that it seemed like there were no upperclassmen left nearby anymore. Weiss guessed that it was because the magic birds kept repeatedly announcing the names of defeated students. The upperclassmen had likely realized there was a strong opponent in the area and had started acting cautiously. Then Weiss showed a menacing grin and declared that it did not matter where they ran as he and Carta flew away together. Weiss decided they would stop targeting first-year students and focus entirely on hunting second and third years instead. Carta immediately agreed. The reason Weiss had chosen Carta as his partner was because of her special abilities. Along with her flying magic, which even veteran mages struggled to control, she also possessed extraordinary detection abilities. While observing the area, Carta spotted someone in the distance and told Weiss that the person over there was likely a third-year student. The target was extremely good at hiding their magical presence. Weiss immediately acknowledged it before taking off from above and diving downward. With flying magic and Carta's detection abilities, the two of them could scout a massive area with ease. On top of that, they were capable of launching surprise attacks directly from above. Inside a forest, attacks coming straight overhead were extremely difficult to defend against. And with countless magic birds flying around the area, It became even harder for people to recognize Weiss as an actual human approaching from the sky. Moments later, Weiss struck the student from behind, instantly bringing him down. Surprise attacks in this world were overwhelmingly powerful. People who were caught unaware rarely protected themselves with magic, meaning attacks from blind spots almost always resulted in a one-shot. That was exactly why Weiss's sensei Milk constantly kept telling him to always make the first move. After checking the remaining time, Carta estimated that they only had around 20 minutes left. Weiss immediately reacted with frustration, declaring that the situation was bad before telling Carta to hurry and find more third-year students as quickly as possible. Carta was shocked by his reaction and tried calming him down, pointing out that they had already earned more than enough points. In her opinion, there was no longer any reason to continue taking unnecessary risks. But Weiss remained unsatisfied, insisting that it was nowhere near enough. He reminded Carta that the point system came with special privileges, and the higher their points climbed, the greater the rewards became. Weiss then explained the Academy's ranking privileges. Reaching C rank with 5,000 points granted a private room. Achieving B rank with 10,000 points unlocked luxurious private rooms. A rank, which required 15,000 points, granted a full tuition waiver. Finally, S rank required 20,000 points and allowed students to skip grades and graduate early. At the moment, Weiss was currently sitting at C rank. By the time students advanced into the second and third years, the number of students dropped significantly while the amount of B and A rank students steadily increased. However, throughout the Academy's long history, not a single student had ever managed to achieve S rank. Carta was stunned after realizing what Weiss had been aiming for this entire time and wondered if he intended to reach S rank by hunting upperclassmen. Weiss clarified that his immediate goal was only B rank. Of course, he still intended to reach S rank someday, but that was not what mattered most to him right now. Weiss then pointed out that the B rank private room privileges included unlimited premium fruits through room service. At that moment, Carta finally realized what Weiss had truly been chasing all along. Weiss explained that about a year ago, during the harsh days of his Spartan-style training, the only thing he genuinely enjoyed was the desserts served after meals. But as the training became increasingly brutal, he slowly lost his ability to enjoy the taste of fruit. Then one day, Zevis prepared something special for him. It was the super premium fruit known as melon. That single day allowed Weiss to regain the sense of taste he had lost. The fruit had been that unbelievably exquisite. Since melons were extremely difficult to obtain, the unlimited access provided through B-rank room service became something Weiss desperately wanted. Weiss loudly declared that during this exam, he planned to collect huge amounts of points from upperclassmen just so he could experience that flavor once again. Then Weiss suddenly changed his mood completely. With puppy-like eyes, he asked Carta for her cooperation until the very end. Carta agreed, saying that since Weiss was helping her as well, she naturally intended to support him too. Deep down, Carta had always believed Weiss was unusually motivated during the exam, but she never expected his motivation to revolve around food. Coincidentally, her own family actually grew melons. She quietly wondered if Weiss would visit her home if she ever told him about it. Suddenly, nearby, a massive dark pillar of smoke or energy erupted violently from the ground. Both Weiss and Carta were shocked by the sight. Even Carta could immediately tell that whatever had caused it was a true monster. She warned Weiss that the situation was no good, believing what that person had done was simply impossible. Carta quickly urged them to leave, but the moment she turned toward Weiss, he had already landed on the ground. Without hesitation, Weiss dashed straight toward the source of the smoke. There, Weiss found a girl calmly sitting down. The girl immediately recognized him as the rumored Weiss Vincent. Weiss quickly recognized her as Eva Everil, a second-year student. He respectfully acknowledged the honor of meeting Eva Everil before asking her for a match. Eva smiled after receiving Weiss's invitation to battle, clearly pleased by the challenge. Eva Everil was known as the strongest student in the academy. In the original story, she was treated like the true final boss, an official cheater, and a game-breaking bug unlike anything ever seen before. Because of her overwhelming strength, academy life had already become boring to her. After this exam, she was originally supposed to leave the academy of her own will. She was also the strongest character no player had ever managed to defeat. If Weiss wanted to fight her, this was his only chance. With only 10 minutes remaining in the exam, he intended to give everything he had. His goal was to defeat Eva and bring the exam arc to a close. Without hesitation, Weiss charged toward her with all his power. Meanwhile, the battle between Cheryl and Alan against Lilith and Cynthia was still unfolding. Cheryl had already collapsed to the ground. Cynthia pointed out that Alan was the only one remaining, while Lilith reminded him not to take it personally. Cynthia declared that if they managed to defeat Alan, the same Alan whom even Weiss could not fully overcome, then Weiss would surely acknowledge them. Together, they told Alan to prepare himself. Alan suddenly became furious, releasing an extremely powerful surge of aura. Lilith and Cynthia were both shocked by the overwhelming pressure. Eventually, the exam finally came to an end. The aftermath of Weiss and Eva's duel revealed massive destruction across the area. Weiss was left exhausted and heavily panting, while Eva still looked completely unaffected by the battle. Eva admitted that Weiss was not bad at all. She had never expected him to push her far enough to actually use magic. Weiss could only acknowledge just how unbelievably strong Eva Everald truly was. He had already used every card available to him, including Absolute Barrier, Dark Eye, and Dark Heal, yet none of them had worked against her. Eva explained that she had already grown bored of academy life and originally intended to leave after the exam. However, after meeting Weiss, she found herself taking a liking to him, which made her decide to remain at the academy a little longer. Soon after, an announcement informed all students that they would now be transported back to Noblesse Magic Academy. Just like that, Weiss had once again caused a major change to the original scenario. Eva remained at the academy, while Kartas successfully avoided expulsion. Then Weiss noticed something unexpected. Cynthia and Lilith had both been defeated. He could hardly believe it and wondered who could possibly have accomplished that. Cynthia apologized to Lilith, admitting that she became too caught up in believing she had grown stronger, which led to this outcome. On top of that, she regretted dragging Lilith into the fight and making her suffer alongside her. Lilith responded by blaming herself instead, believing she was simply too weak and had only tarnished Cynthia's battle record. After overhearing their conversation, Weiss finally realized that Alan had defeated both Lilith and Cynthia. Weiss stared toward Alan, while Alan silently looked back at him. And with that, the joint 3-year tag exam finally came to a close. Soon after the exam, life at the academy gradually returned to normal. Weiss had been promoted to B rank and finally obtained the luxurious lifestyle he had been aiming for. Even though everyday life remained filled with constant competition, Weiss honestly began feeling unsatisfied competing against lower-ranked students. For a while, it seemed as though those peaceful days would continue without interruption. But then everything suddenly changed when Chloe announced that a guest instructor would be joining them that day. The moment the guest instructor greeted the class, the students were immediately shocked. One student could not help commenting on how beautiful she was. At the same time, Weiss's vision slowly began turning red. It turned out that the new instructor was Milk. Weiss could not believe it and immediately realized that his nightmare had returned. Milk announced that starting today, she would be in charge of their combat training and introduced herself. She then asked if anyone had a question. Duke Billion raised his hand and asked why she had ended up there as a substitute instructor. Nearby, Weiss thought that it was nice of Duke Billion to ask that question since it was exactly what he wanted to ask as well. Weiss kept wondering why Milk had come and why she was even there in the first place. Milk quickly dismissed Duke Billion's question and told him not to ask pointless things, leaving Duke Billion embarrassed. Weiss wondered what was wrong with Milk. Then Chloe spoke up and explained that Milk had ended up there because they were currently short on instructors. Ever since the tag test the other day, many upperclassmen had started asking for extra combat training outside of class. Because of that, the academy needed to bring in additional instructors. Weiss stared sharply at Milk and realized that the upperclassmen were all fired up because they did not want underclassmen looking down on them. At the same time, he thought that hiring Milk as an instructor was the biggest mistake possible. Milk suddenly turned toward Weiss and called out his name. Weiss was startled, and Milk asked if he had been thinking about something unnecessary. Weiss was shocked and wondered how she had figured that out. He quickly denied it and explained that it was nothing and that he had simply zoned out for a moment. Milk replied that she understood. Sometime later at the mountain, Milk ordered Weiss to do push-ups. Weiss struggled badly as he tried to push himself up because the stack of weights on him was far too heavy. Milk commented that it had been a while and noted that Weiss seemed to have improved quite a bit over the past few months. Meanwhile, Weiss could only think that Milk had probably come to the academy just to bully him. One of the nearby students noticed that Weiss was actually listening for once, making them wonder what was going on with the substitute teacher. Milk overheard them and immediately turned toward them with a frightening look. She questioned whether they could even call that a proper run and remarked that the academy seemed full of spoiled brats. Milk then announced that everyone there would continue climbing the mountain until sunset. As for Weiss, he would have to climb the mountain while doing push-ups. Weiss politely refused and insisted that it was impossible. And so, with Milk's arrival, combat training class turned into hell, or rather, a hell within hell. Whenever training days approached, everyone trembled in fear. But on this particular day, they learned that even deserts could have oases. That day, the boys' class was brought to a swimming pool. Weiss wondered why they were at a pool, while the other students questioned what Milk was planning this time. Nearby, one student pointed out that the girls' class was approaching. Soon after, Milk loudly apologized for keeping the boys waiting. She announced that today's lesson would be water training. The moment the boys saw the girls wearing bikinis, they completely lost their minds. Milk looked at them like they were hopeless idiots, while Alan remained completely unfazed. Because the instructor eventually got fed up with the boys' behavior, the water training was never held again. Later in the cafeteria, some students noticed Carta sitting alone and pointed out that, as usual, she was eating by herself. Another student mentioned that Carta never seemed to eat together with Weiss' group. Carta explained that Weiss already had Cynthia with him, so she thought she would only get in the way if she joined them. The students laughed and agreed with her. They then remarked that in the end, Weiss and Carta had only been partners for the tag team exam. They added that Carta had only avoided expulsion because she had relied on Weiss back then, and they reminded her that she should properly thank him for it. Carta glared at them angrily, causing one of the students to react and question the look she had just given them. Nearby, Cynthia and Lilith noticed the situation. The students continued insulting Carta, calling her a parasite and saying that the only thing she was good at was flying. They mocked her for clinging to the academy by depending on someone stronger and warned that without Weiss beside her, they could have her expelled at any time. They then told her to prepare herself. At that moment, Cynthia and Lilith walked over and called out to Carta. Cynthia then calmly asked if she would be okay eating together with them. Carta looked frightened as she thought that just when one problem had disappeared, another one had suddenly appeared instead. As they sat together, Cynthia explained that she had reconsidered her opinion of Carta. She brought up the recent joint tag team exam and mentioned that Carta and Weiss together had apparently defeated 24 students, including second and third years. Cynthia admitted that it was an impressive achievement and praised Carta, saying that it was a record-breaking result. Carta quickly dismissed the praise and insisted that Weiss had accomplished all of it on his own. However, Lilith stated that even if it was Weiss, she did not believe he could have achieved all of that alone. Lilith explained that Carta's flight magic and her impressive abilities were what made those results possible. She even admitted that if she and Cynthia had teamed up with Weiss instead, they still would not have been able to reach the same score. Cynthia then admitted that it frustrated her, but she and Lilith had been completely defeated. After that, Lilith asked Carta to continue looking after Weiss from now on. Carta became flustered, but then Cynthia's mood suddenly shifted. She explained that she and Lilith had wanted to talk to Carta about this for a long time and asked why she kept avoiding them. Carta tried to explain herself, but Cynthia stopped her and said that it was fine. Cynthia then told her that from now on, together with Weiss, they would all get along. Hearing that, Carta smiled happily. Soon after, Carta suddenly remembered something and asked where Weiss was. Meanwhile, Weiss was lying on his bed, unable to move his body because of the injuries he had received from Milk's water training. Weiss wondered if Milk planned on healing him already, but Milk politely refused. Afterward, thanks to the training Carta had gone through with Weiss, she managed to give those bullies a taste of their own medicine during the exam and ultimately got them expelled. Meanwhile, Alan remembered the day he watched his village burn. On that day, he lost both his family and his hometown. Several months earlier, Cheryl had informed Alan about the Noblesse Magic Academy. Alan learned that graduating from that academy could allow someone to obtain the title of a noble. Cheryl explained that graduates were said to receive authority equal to that of nobles. Once they graduated, even commoners could freely enter dungeons all around the world, and traveling between countries would also become far easier. Hearing that, Alan realized that it meant he could use his own hands to destroy the monster that had taken away his family and hometown. Because of that, Alan made up his mind and decided that he would take the entrance exam for Noblesse Academy. Weiss later thought about how Alan had trained and prepared for the exam with the help of Cheryl and Master Darius. However, Alan's exam results had ended up being a complete disaster. At the same time, Weiss Vincent had been overwhelmingly strong to the point of being terrifying. Yet for some reason, Alan still passed even though he had been convinced that he failed. But the joy of passing did not last long. After enrollment, the Academy's point system nearly caused Alan to fail over and over again. Alan remembered the time a student approached him and mocked him for being the loser that Weiss had beaten down. The student even remarked that Alan looked perfect for point farming, just like a slime monster. At that point, Alan had enough. He refused to continue living a life where everything could simply be taken away from him. Before he realized it, Weiss had started constantly watching him. It seemed that Weiss viewed Alan as someone worthy of fighting against. As the top-ranked first-year student, Weiss made Alan wonder if his strength had truly been recognized. At the same time, Alan himself felt the same way. He wanted to fight Weiss again. Alan became determined to catch up to Weiss. He would continue winning again and again, and this time, he planned to defeat Weiss no matter what. Back in the present, Alan's anger caught Weiss' attention. Alan then remarked that he had expected more from Weiss. Before walking away, Alan admitted that he truly hated Weiss. Weiss casually replied that there was no need to worry because the feeling was mutual. Nearby students noticed the exchange and became curious after seeing Weiss and Alan seemingly arguing with each other. They wondered what the two of them had been talking about. Meanwhile, Weiss was later seen practicing with his sword. Nearby, Milk noticed him and pointed out that he was working quite hard. She even looked somewhat impressed by him. Weiss admitted that he could not get the distracting thoughts out of his head. Hearing that, Milk asked if those thoughts were about Alan. Milk mentioned that she had heard from Darius that Weiss and Alan did not seem to be getting along very well. Weiss replied that Alan was simply too soft, and that was what irritated him. He then brought up what happened earlier during history class, where the lesson focused on how the country treated slaves and demi-humans. Earlier in the classroom, Weiss had stood up and explained that most slaves came from poor families and were usually children born to irresponsible parents who had no money and barely received any proper education on how to behave. According to Weiss, many of them eventually turned to crime or ended up dying in the streets. Because of that, he believed that the slave system was not entirely evil since it served as a way to control people like them. Alan listened to all of it without showing much reaction, but he clearly disagreed. That disagreement alone was enough to anger Weiss. Later on, Alan approached him in the hallway afterward. As Weiss explained this to Milk, he brought up how Alan had openly declared that slavery itself was evil. Weiss added that Alan even claimed that nobles themselves were unnecessary. Coming from someone who almost never showed emotion, those words stood out even more. Weiss pointed out that Alan had said all of that right in front of a crowd filled with nobles. Weiss was certain he was not the only one shocked by it, but what irritated him the most was Alan's overly naive way of speaking. Weiss continued ranting about Alan's views, saying that talking about how war was bad without anything else behind it was no different from empty preaching. To Weiss, Alan acted as if simply avoiding conflict would solve everything, yet he offered no real answer. Even if slavery disappeared, wars would still continue to exist in the world, and children would still lose their parents because of them. Weiss then mocked Alan's belief that those who were capable should simply help others. According to Weiss, Alan's ideals were nothing more than nonsense. Weiss argued that people lived for desire. In a world like that, Weiss believed lofty ideals had no real meaning. By that point, Milk had already started looking bored. Weiss noticed and asked if she had even been listening. Milk casually reacted before admitting that she had heard him. She then informed Weiss that Alan had grown up in an orphanage, so perhaps Weiss' words had affected him more deeply than expected. Milk admitted that she understood why Alan had lost his temper, but at the same time, she had not expected Weiss himself to become that emotional over a classroom discussion. She then wondered if it was because Alan was the one involved. Weiss suddenly fell silent. Deep down, Weiss quietly realized that the reason he had become irrationally angry back then was because of the previous Weiss. He started wondering if the original Weiss had truly hated Alan that much. Milk then explained that clashing opinions was not necessarily a bad thing. However, once people became adults, even something as simple as openly disagreeing was often no longer allowed. After saying that, Milk tossed a wooden sword toward Weiss and told him to prepare himself for sparring. Soon after, the two of them began fighting. During the spar, Milk instructed Weiss to keep his movements to a minimum. Weiss acknowledged the advice. Weiss swung his sword at Milk, but she easily dodged the attack. In the next moment, Milk kicked him in the back and bluntly told him that he still did not understand. Milk then rushed toward Weiss and remarked that the way he fought felt nostalgic. She revealed that she herself had originally been a student at the academy as well. Hearing that immediately shocked Weiss. Milk explained that she had also clashed with many different kinds of people during her time there. According to her, anyone attending that academy was bound to experience the same thing eventually. Weiss had seen Milk's profile countless times in the original game, yet he had never once heard about something like this in her background. Milk explained that this was the first time she had ever spoken about it. She admitted that she did not even want to remember those days, which was why she had stayed silent about it until now. In the end, she revealed that she had been expelled from the academy. Hearing that immediately left Weiss stunned. Milk then began telling the story. Back then, the academy's point system had not been as refined as it was now. Because of that, she ended up leaving before she could even show her true strength. At the time, she had made many excuses for herself, but when she looked back on it honestly, the answer was simple. She simply had not been strong enough. Weiss immediately denied that idea and could not believe someone like Milk had ever been weak. However, Milk calmly explained that everyone started out weak in the beginning. Back then, she had overestimated her own abilities, and that difference between confidence and reality might have been what decided everything. Nearby, a man silently approached and watched the two of them sparring. Milk then told Weiss that people usually did not change easily. That had always been her belief. But according to her, Weiss himself had changed. She explained that getting lost sometimes could not be helped, and that clashes between people were sometimes necessary. However, convictions were something that still needed to be carried through properly. Milk then stated that Weiss was different from her. Unlike her, Weiss already knew the correct path. Weiss quietly fell silent after hearing that. He then pointed out that Milk was being unusually kind today. Milk casually replied that she had always been kind. Afterward, she added that she supposed anyone could act kindly when they wanted to. Right after that, she mentioned that once their sparring ended, they still needed to think about Weiss' next exercise. At that moment, Weiss realized that it was already time for that event to begin. Milk then explained that his next exercise was something where failure would not simply end with expulsion. It was a brutal training exercise that claimed lives every single year. The exercise was survival training in the northern part of the Garial Mountains, a place filled with monsters. Weiss calmly stated that he would not die and that such a thing would never happen to him. Milk reminded Weiss that she herself had failed because she overestimated her own strength. She admitted that she did not want Weiss to end up following the same path she once took. She warned him not to become arrogant just because he had become the top student among the lower grades. Weiss accepted her words and admitted that she was right. After that, Weiss asked if they should continue sparring a little longer. Milk immediately agreed and prepared herself once more. Just as the two were about to clash again, the man watching from behind suddenly shouted for the lights to be turned out. In the next moment, the lights shut off and the entire area became dark. Milk then announced that they would stop and rest for the day. Weiss quietly agreed. The Noblesse Magic Academy's combat training uniform had a special function. When worn inside a prepared magic circle, the uniform would activate whenever the wearer took damage. In exchange for consuming a large amount of magic power, it greatly reduced injuries and pain. Because of these uniforms, students were able to fight each other seriously while still remaining relatively safe. Thanks to this system, Noblesse Magic Academy had produced many talented individuals who overwhelmingly surpassed students from other academies. However, an instructor later explains to the class that there were still opponents in the world against whom those uniforms were completely useless. Those opponents were monsters. The instructor then informed the class that the next day's exercise would be a survival training exercise in the northern Garial Mountains, where monsters freely roamed. Although students were allowed to withdraw from the exercise, the instructor regretfully added that doing so would negatively affect their grades. The instructor then announced that those who were prepared should sign the paper. Weiss immediately stood up and became the first to line up. Right after him, Cynthia and Lilith followed as well. After returning to his seat, Weiss turned toward Alan and casually suggested that maybe they should just withdraw instead. Alan immediately became irritated and declared that there was no way he would ever withdraw. Cheryl also stated that she had no intention of withdrawing either, and she questioned why Weiss suddenly brought that up in the first place. Weiss simply replied that he had only felt like saying it. Afterward, Weiss continued walking away while Cheryl quietly wondered what was going on with him. Once every student had signed the paper, the instructor thanked them and remarked that everyone would be participating. At last, it was finally beginning. This event, up until now, all of their training had only been a warm-up. From this point onward, the real game would finally begin. To Weiss, the Academy's expulsion system was actually merciful in its own way. By removing those without enough ability early on, it reduced the number of students who would otherwise die meaningless deaths later. From here onward, failure would no longer end with simple expulsion. After the long hike, the class finally arrived at the Garial Mountains, and the so-called death game officially began. The instructor explained that the exercise would last for 3 days. Students would form pairs and survive together inside the forest. As already mentioned earlier, the forest was filled with an unknown number of monsters roaming throughout the area. The instructor informed them that pairs who defeated monsters would receive points, but more importantly, survival itself should remain their highest priority. Chloe then explained that just like during the previous tag test, each pair would be sent to different locations. Even in the original game, the weather had always been a random factor, and a blizzard was considered the absolute worst-case scenario. Combined with how brutal this event already was, it perfectly matched Weiss's dark mood. The instructor then announced that the pairings had already been decided beforehand, and the students whose names were called should step forward. The first pair called was Shirley Elias and Lilith Scarlet. Shirley and Lilith becoming partners was different from the original story, but Weiss believed that the overall scenario would probably still remain unchanged. Next, Cynthia, Violetta, and Alan were called. This pairing matched the original story exactly. Cynthia was the main heroine of the game, and normally, this event was supposed to greatly deepen the relationship between her and Alan, or at least that was how it should have happened. At that moment, Cynthia reassured Weiss that her devotion belonged only to him. Weiss calmly replied that he believed her. Even so, Weiss had a feeling things would not stay that simple. Nearby, Alan called out to Shirley, while Shirley confidently declared that she would absolutely win. Alan responded that he would not lose either. Other students watching them commented on how well Shirley and Alan got along. To them, the two already looked like a couple, and nobody else seemed capable of getting between them. Seeing that, Weiss could not help wondering why Alan would eventually end up becoming so deeply involved with Cynthia despite already having someone like Shirley beside him. At first, Weiss questioned whether Alan was simply the type of scumbag who had no issue two-timing women. But he quickly dismissed that thought. The truth was much crueler. This conversation between Alan and Shirley would become the final conversation the two of them would ever share. At that moment, Carta informed Weiss that his name was already being called. Weiss reacted in surprise and asked if that was really the case. Duke Billion then approached Weiss and informed him that the two of them had been paired together. Duke told Weiss that they would need to work together for the next 3 days. During this exercise, Alan's already painful life was about to suffer another devastating blow. And in order to overcome that tragedy, Alan's relationship with Cynthia would rapidly grow deeper. The greatest trigger that would strengthen the bond between the two of them was the death of Shirley Elias during the survival training exercise.